Hello, my name is Jeff Moats, and this is the first economic report for Managerial Economics, Econ 5113. Today is July 13th, 2013, and just before I jump in, I want to preface that my PowerPoint presentation will have short bullet points, 1 to 3 words each, and I prefer to expand verbally on those bullet points rather than writing out all of the thought behind them. That way I'm not just simply reading the slide, but it's really just an abbreviated form of what I'm saying. Alright, so this report is based off of 2 articles, one from Forbes magazine and the other one from The Economist. The Forbes magazine article was written by a Jeremy Greenfield, who is an individual contributor, and the title of it is Department of Justice Wins eBook Antitrust Case. What's next? Will Apple appeal? In The Economist, the author was just 3 initials, AES, and its title was Apple's eBook Conspiracy. The Price is Not Right. So the focus of this is obviously Apple, the manufacturer of computers, software, distributor of music, and now ebooks, as early as 2010. They're one of the largest companies in the world with a market cap of about $400 billion, but just recently they were accused and found guilty of price-fixing ebook prices. Now, each author sort of has their own way of describing the wrongdoing and the options available for Apple, but the reason I selected these 2 articles is the Forbes magazine seems to be more focused on the options available for Apple and the impact it might have on their stock price. So it was really, the audience for the Forbes magazine was more the investor, and The Economist was more about the wrongdoing and the impact or the potential impact to the marketplace. So it's more about the economy or the industry rather than the investors and what's going to happen to Apple stock. So a little bit about the wrongdoing, though. Apple in 2010 entered into the ebook market against Amazon. Prior to that, it was just Amazon and maybe a handful of small players, but Amazon was the massive, almost monopoly of the ebook world. And they were, at the time, Amazon was selling their ebooks below the price of regular books, regular, hold in your hand with pages books. They were doing this to improve the sales of their ebook reader, the Kindle. And so when Apple entered the market, they wanted to steer people towards the iPad and reading things on the iPad rather than reading things on the Kindle. So they got the 5 major publishers together and developed a model called the agency model, where the publishers actually set the pricing of the books and then pay Apple a 30% margin for every book sold. Now, there are a lot of significant economic theories and systems that are that could be discussed in this entire case study. But I'll start really broad with economic Darwinism, which I believe it's mentioned on page 8 of our book. Economic Darwinism is usually visible as when competition is weeded out because organizations are ill-designed and really failed to adapt to their changing environment. In this situation, Apple entered the market with a new model, the agency model. They were able to gain the confidence of the publishers to sell at a rate where everybody could make their margin and make money, and basically alienated Amazon, even with their Kindle, their Kindle, because Apple already had a proprietary piece of equipment called an iPad that millions and millions of Americans already had access to and could read. And of course, the idea of a monopoly was discussed in pre-2010 ebook industry, which Amazon pretty much had cornered the market on it. There were cheap knockoffs of their Kindle reader but nobody really could compete with the fact that they had the reader and they also had the ability to sell the books and they had the licensing agreements with the publishers. So they had a vertically integrated monopoly of this entire industry. Now, what I thought was also interesting is that Amazon started off by price complementing their Kindle Reader. They wanted to sell a lot of their Kindle Reader, and I think the reason they wanted that is that was their access into the market. If the people did not have something to read their ebooks on, not a lot of people would want to stare at a CRT screen or a flat screen on their computer reading a book. They wanted to sit down with it, lay in bed with it. So they needed to sell these Kindle Readers, and in order to do that, they offered books at substantially lower prices. Potentially even, they were what in business are called loss leaders. They might have lost money on those actual books to make more money on their Kindle Readers and hook the customer for the long term. Supply and demand is also very evident in this, like most case studies that affect market economics or industry economics. But it is a very unique supply and demand relationship that we see in this, and the reason for that, I believe, is you have a proprietary piece of hardware that then limits the supply of ebooks to the market, right? That really determines, in fact, the size of your market, and the supply of ebooks is directly correlated to the number of ebook readers out on the market, whether it's some very long algorithm that determines the supply, or maybe it's just something like an average, 1.2 ebooks per ebook reader. But really the most important or most interesting or most unique part of this supply and demand relationship is that when Apple entered the market, yes, they did see an average increase in prices of ebooks, yet they did not see demand decrease, which usually when price increases, demand tends to decrease. So that relationship was, in my opinion, it was offset by the massive influx of iPad users, and so you had this other half of this market that all of a sudden just became available and could now all of a sudden read ebooks because of the hardware that they owned, and so you might have doubled, tripled, maybe times 100. I'm not exactly sure how many Kindles were sold compared to how many iPads at the time that Apple entered the market, but you saw obviously demand did not diminish, and Apple was able to sell at a higher price. Obviously, first mover advantage is something that is in most economic books, and it basically means that a company has an idea and is the first to move on it, and therefore has the luxury to either charge a higher price and reap higher margins, or they have the option to get customers interested in their product first, get them hooked, and develop the brand equity that goes along with that. And I think Amazon, seeing that they needed to have that piece of hardware in their customers' hands for them to really hook them for the long term, they chose to forego the higher margins in the short term and sell their Kindles, their ebook readers, and get that first mover advantage for the long-term hook for their customers. And the next two really go hand in hand, price fixing and cartels. Price fixing is where a company is colluding with either suppliers or distributors or people at their same level, organizations at their same level, other competitors, to some way manage and fix pricing to their advantage, right? To their advantage and others' detriment, and smaller companies' detriment. And those are usually done through cartels, which are the agreements, right? And these can be verbal agreements. They can be talked over the telephone. They can be sent via email. The bottom line is that there is an agreement between these companies to some end goal that they will fix prices at a level that's beneficial for them and not beneficial for another company. And the last thing I noticed was, barriers to entry. Every industry has barriers to entry. It just depends on whether they are low barrier to entry or high barrier to entry. And I would say that the ebook marketplace has a lot of high barriers to entry. Number one, you have to be able to manufacture an ebook reader. Since you have this sort of system view of this marketplace, or the companies that are currently operating it, like Apple and Amazon, they have this system-wide view of providing not only the hardware but also the actual content as well. You're not going to have somebody like a Microsoft come out with an ebook reader and people are going to, latch onto it. The only way that would happen is if they had some sort of benefit, maybe a price benefit to be able to select who to purchase from, whether it be Amazon or Apple. And more than likely, those two companies will remain proprietary with their content offerings. So not only do you have to provide the hardware, the actual ebook reader, but then you also have to get the agreements from all of the publishers, or a majority of the publishers of these books, to be able to provide the content. So this is a balancing act, and very difficult to do. And to be able to penetrate this market, it's got to be a strategy that works. And in my opinion, Apple's strategy worked. And I'll go into that more here in a second in the conclusion. But that's barriers to entry. So now, on to the conclusion. The question that ran through my head more than anything is Apple guilty? And in reality, for this economic report, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The impact that Apple has had on this marketplace, the economics of it all, is really astounding. And they were able to generate competition in a marketplace that was pretty locked up. I mean, really, Amazon had a really good thing going by themselves as a monopoly. So even though the question is Apple guilty, even though it doesn't matter to this report, in my opinion, Apple did what every capitalist dreams of doing, is they provided more competition in a marketplace that didn't have any. So if you want to add that to the list of economic significance, really adding competition to a marketplace that didn't have any, I'm not even sure how I could understand why this would be an antitrust case. The fact that Amazon had this locked up to begin with and there was no other competition, that seems more like an antitrust case to me. So that is my report. Hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to email me with any questions. Oh, and one more thing. I apologize for the length of the presentation. It just seems like there was a lot more to this than 3 or 5 minutes would allow.